Thank you all for I am going to spotlight mine. And Ellen, you are a co-host, so if you could just keep your eye on the crew, that would be helpful. And I'm remembering that I wanted to do something else. We'll see if that's going to happen or not. Okay.
I think this is it.
I have a treat for you. I realize there's a way to bring the Torah out that fits with our acts of study. So welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone. This is session 3 of the Window into Judaism, and this is the last session for this cycle. As we get to the end, we can certainly talk about it if there are other topics that you might be interested in that would provide a different window into Judaism. We do have all sorts of other kinds of study opportunities that we do here at Temple Beth Shalom. So this week we are talking about the pomegranate. And the pomegranate is different than challah and different than the Seder plate. The challah is created bread. In other words, that you have wheat, you cut the wheat, you thresh the wheat, you winnow the wheat, you grind the wheat, you mix in the ingredients, you turn it into bread, and you braid it into a particular shape. That's how we have challah, right? The Seder plate is a very different kind of ritual object. It's a physical metal or ceramic object that someone has put together with the symbols laid out on it. A pomegranate is really different because you just go pick it off a tree. It's not really a ritual object, it's a ritual object. Sort of see that in a little while as we get into some of this experience. It's just a piece of our natural world. But as I hope to show you tonight, there is a ton of connection and meaning. Judaism has said that there is so much meaning in a pomegranate, that's as many seeds as a pomegranate has. And we will definitely get into that. Give me 1 second, I just have to make this active. Oh. This meeting is... Okay. So, before we jump into the pomegranate, you have to be really careful because it will stain your clothes and it will stain your kitchen. We start, as we have each of the other sessions, with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign in the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot and commanding us to engage in the words of Torah. As I say that, it doesn't say, oh, I'm going to make the words holy. It says that the holiness comes as we engage in the words. So that's somewhat, I think, important, valuable to understand. Okay, so pomegranates. How many of you have eaten a pomegranate before? How many of you have taken apart, dissected a pomegranate in order to enjoy it? How many of you have had pomegranate juice? Okay. How many of you hear the word pomegranate and it might as well be a persimmon? Because you have no idea what a persimmon is. By the way, persimmons are really good too. And they do grow right here, as do pomegranates. So, the place to start when you start talking about pomegranates is why is a pomegranate important in Jewish life? Here you have these words from Deuteronomy. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams and springs and fountains issuing from plain and hill, a land of wheat, barley, vines, figs, pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey. Okay? Seven species. Okay? These are called the 7 species. Wheat and barley are kind of obvious. What's the vine?
Wine.
Grapes. Figs, pomegranates, a land of olive trees, and what's the honey? It is not from the bees. Anybody want to guess? Give you a hit. Sadika tamar yifrach yifrach, sadika tamar yifrach. It really didn't help any of you. Does anybody know what a tamar is? Hmm? A Tamar. Does anyone have a friend named Tamar? Yes, so do you know what Tamar means? No? It's a date.
Oh.
Honey was the sweetener of the, was one of the, you do have bee honey, obviously. There are places where you get that explained in Bible, but this is a reference to honey that comes from dates. And I know there's no Trader Joe's in Vero Beach, but I'm guessing all of you have crossed paths or have access to either a Trader Joe's or someone who goes to Trader Joe's. They are now starting to sell at Trader Joe's Ceylon, which is date honey. It's like almost a date molasses. It's really good stuff. You can get it in Israel. We used to go to, when we were in Israel, buy up a few bottles because it's much less expensive in Israel than trying to get it through Amazon here. Apparently Trader Joe's, it's so good that even Trader Joe's is now marketing it. Does that tell you something? So those are the 7 species and the rest of it. A land where you may eat food without stint, where you will lack nothing, a land whose rocks are iron, from hills you can mine copper. When you have eaten your fill, kakatuv kakatuv, v'alchata v'savata uverachta et Adonai Elohecha al haaretz hanotan hatova asher natan lach, that when you will eat, you will be satisfied, and you will give thanks to the God who gave you this good land. And I say it in the Hebrew, it was really, that's actually part of Hamazon, which is a blessing for grace after meals. And summer camps, in my world, in summer camps was a place where a lot of us learned Birkat Hamazon, was learn this grace after meals. And I was up at URJ Camp Coleman. I'll actually be in faculty up there this summer. And there was a garden project there. It's called Campscape. And they had a sign, and it had that quote. You shall eat and be satisfied, and then thank God for the land, the good land that God has given. Every night, or 3 times a day, in the dining hall, they would say, Ve'alchata v'savata uverachta et Adonai Elohecha al haaretz hatova asher natan lach. In fact, I can say the quote because I've sung it so many times, in addition to obviously reading in the Torah. 3 times a day, the kids saying it. And there it is sitting in the garden. And I said, oh, do you know these words? And they're looking at me like, huh? And I'm like, you say it all the time. They're like, huh? And as soon as I started singing, they're like, oh yeah, we know how to sing that. They didn't know what the words meant. They sang it every day. They knew it had to do with thank you, God, for the food we eat, but they didn't make all of those the connections. It was really quite incredible to realize how it takes a little bit of that extra effort to not just go through the motions of stuff, but to really delve into the weight and the meaning and connections. So here, this is one of my favorite verses I have lots of, funny thing, I have lots of favorite verses of Torah. It should be really shocking and surprising. But v'alchata savata uverachta et Adonai Elohecha, you eat, you are satisfied, and then you praise. So this is part of the first fruits ritual. And here we have a mention of pomegranates. Okay? So part of the first fruits rituals, because when do pomegranates ripen? What is the season of the pomegranate? When do you see them in the stores here, by the way? They're a fall. Any Jewish holidays that you happen to know in the fall? Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur,
Sukkot.
and Sukkot, the fruit holiday, one of our fruit holidays. So yes, it's right in the middle of the High Holy Days and Sukkot, when you're having a harvest of dates and pomegranates and grapes and olives. That's all getting harvested at that time. Figs are a little different because they kind of you harvest them kind of continuously. But pomegranates were one of the first fruits of the season, and this is when you're living in Israel. The Israel we've screwed up our food here in the United States in a lot of ways. Our food is not seasonal anymore. I can go to get an apple any time of year. Sometimes they're a little more expensive. They might not be as good quality, but I can get apples. I can get a lot of the fruit and produce and stuff you can get it all year round. In Israel, it is really seasonal, and you really get the experience of it, that you will get pomegranates, giant, beautiful, incredible pomegranates, and they will be around for about 6 to 8 weeks. And you'll start to get first the little ones, and then they'll get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then they'll start to get tireder and tireder and tireder, until then they disappear for a whole year. You get that 2-month window where you really get to enjoy pomegranates. It actually happens here that pomegranates really are only around in the fall, but that's one of those few things that I see that seasonal here. Israel, it's everything. Strawberries, I tell you, strawberries as big as my fist, and they scoop them up with dustpans, and it's 3 shekels for a kilo. Do you know how many pounds are in a kilo? 2. That's a lot of strawberries. For 3 shekels, 4 shekels, that's $1, right? 2 pounds of strawberries for $1. That's pretty good. Big. I'm not making this up. They really are. And they taste, can I tell you, they taste like they're from heaven. They're just juicy and they taste really good. I hope I'm making you hungry. But that's kind of how the fruit runs in Israel. And so here you are getting ready for the new year, and pomegranates come back. What do we know about the shape of a pomegranate? This is really kind of important. Do you notice these are in the shape of a pomegranate. Do you notice what's on the top? Okay. I'm trying to think of, really, I didn't put a single pomegranate picture with a crown in it. Really? Oh, okay, there you go. Right here, do you see it? Okay. That's do you see the crown? Okay. That's the crown of the pomegranate. The flowers they're really beautiful, bright kind of an orange red. And they've got that, it looks like a little crown. Why is that? Sorry about that. Why is that so significant at the time of the Jewish New Year? What is the Jewish New Year pointing out? God is the king. God is the sovereign over all. We're acknowledging that and God's kingship. And the pomegranate is a great way of acknowledging it's a sign of God's crown right there in nature. So that's in the field. That's in our mouth. That's a fruit. Okay? Now I'm going to kind of take you to a symbolic level. And what I want to do is I am also going to take out a Torah scroll. Pull this a little bit more into the middle. Now, typically, if I was taking a Torah out of the ark, I would have all of you rise, but since this is a teaching context, I'm not going to do that. But I wanted to take the Torah out because I wanted you to kind of see, this is called a Sephardic Torah scroll. So this is a style that would have come from Spain and from the areas where the Muslim world was. You tend to read it either standing up like this, or there are some cradles that lay it down, as opposed to the Ashkenazic scrolls, which have no wood and are in just a soft cover, and those lay down flat. So this is a Sephardic scroll. What do you notice on it? They're bells, okay? So we're going to be talking about that. If you look around it, where are my little pomegranate friends? Okay, I'm like, I know there are pomegranates on it. Silly me. If y'all want to come up really quick to look, but there are pomegranates decorating the inside of it. Okay? So there are pomegranates. And guess what these are called? These are called rimonim, or pomegranates. Yep. okay? And these actually are adorned with actual pomegranate designs as well, okay? It's like that. So again, window into Judaism, I'm bringing out to show you off the Torah and its pomegranates so you can just see. I don't know how many of you have seen the inside of a scroll, but that's what the scroll looks like. We actually read from it, and I don't remember if I explained this before. In the Catholic Church, you have communion, right? And you have an ark, and the wafer and the wine, they come out from that ark, and then they get blessed by the priest, and then they get consumed by the people. And you have ritual for taking this stuff out, ritual for sharing it, and then ritual for putting the stuff back. Am I good so far, Sanford? Okay. Our Torah service is an analog for communion. It's almost exactly, if you came and saw our Torah service, because in a Christian service, there's a place where you read scripture, right? Okay? That is not our Torah service. When the reading scripture, we have a whole set of prayers that we do. When we read Torah, it's like the communion service. Again, it's in an ark. We have ritual for bringing it out because it's a sacred object. We are, instead of an offering of the wine and the wafer, we're doing an offering of words. And so we are reading from the scroll in that setting to connect across time and space. And I'm going to show you a little bit more of that with this next piece. And by the way, this is in the packet, but if you can all see it up here, it's probably a little bit easier to see. And so if you look, then I put down the clicker. Muhahaha. I don't even know which direction I'm going. Okay. So on its hem, make pomegranates of blue, purple, and crimson yarn all around the hem with bells of gold between them all around. A golden bell and a pomegranate, a golden bell and a pomegranate all around the hem of the robe. And Aaron shall wear it while officiating, so the sound of it is heard when he comes into the sanctuary before the Lord and when he goes out, that he might not die. Okay? So we are getting a description. What are we getting a description of? Bells and pomegranates on the clothing of the priest that they wore when they went into the Holy of Holies, when they were doing acts of ritual. Okay? What do I have here? I have a Torah scroll dressed up like a priest, right down to the bells and the pomegranates. And there's other different points of connection. In fact, what did the priest wear on his head? A big elaborate headdress. Ta-da! You actually have some Torah scrolls that have crowns on top of them as well. Really pretty incredible. And so here you can see that the pomegranates that are discussed, that are part of the priest's clothing, here comes to the Torah scroll. And why I think this is so extraordinary is we don't have priests and we're not doing sacrifices in Judaism anymore. What's the Torah written on? Parchment. It's written on the skin of an animal. We read it at the time they would have been doing sacrifices from an object that is physically connected in symbolism to the people who were doing the sacrifices. And so what we've done is created this ritual that with time and space and physical object ties all of it together. Do we talk
Rabbi?
about that? Yes. Go ahead, Ellen.
Well then how did the rabbi become separate from the priest in the ritual of the Torah?
There's a couple of different questions in that, Ellen. So the priests, the Kohanim, Aaron and his descendants, were the ones who did the sacrifices in the temple in Jerusalem. When the second temple is destroyed, the sacrifices come to an end. There were already teachers, rabbis, in the world at that point, We don't know the full history of all of it. We have a few sources. Some of it's New Testament, some of it's Josephus, some of it's Philo. There are a few people who are writing. None of it's a complete or and the rabbis themselves. None of them are, they all have issues with being reliable witnesses for a few different reasons. The rabbis don't replace the priests, right? Do you have to be a rabbi to read Torah?
No.
No. Rabbi just means teacher. I've just been hired by the congregation along with our cantor to be the primary people to make sure these rituals happen. But any Jewish adult, that's in fact how do you become bar mitzvah? Or bat mitzvah? How do you become a Jewish adult? By being part of the ritual of reading Torah. And so the rabbis are a completely different group doing something completely different. But when the priests in the temple stopped functioning, they picked up the mantle of leadership of Jewish tradition. Did that explain your question, Ellen?
Yes.
Okay. So part of when we talk about pomegranates and we talk about the land and the fruit, it's also incredible to me, and you'll see why in a little bit there's even more there, but it's this connection. The pomegranates are one of these amazing, beautiful pieces of symbol that help connect the whole experience of Torah to the sacrifices in ancient Israel. As a fruit, they connect us to the land of Israel, because when you eat a pomegranate, first, guess where I ate my first pomegranate? When I was in Israel. I will always remember those experiences, because they're very much a fruit that's available in Israel. And so it is one of those symbols that ties together all of these different pieces. Okay? Now I'm going to switch gears here. This is very concrete. I can show you the pomegranates, right? You can see the pomegranates. You can hear the pomegranates. It's pretty cool. Now I'm going to get really esoteric and talk to you about the space-time continuum. Okay? Now, if I can run fast enough, I should be able to break, never mind, sorry. Comic book reference there, okay? Learned in every science fiction show, don't mess with the space-time continuum, right? You're with me on that. Avengers should not have messed with space-time continuum. Captain Kirk should never mess with the space-time continuum. The X-Men, again, never, and now I'm blanking on the Flash's name, should never mess with the space-time continuum. We are going to, however, discuss the space-time continuum. Are you all ready? Okay. So we started, when we started a few weeks ago, we started with this text. Elu devarim she'en lahem shi'or, she'adam ochel perotehem bo'olam hazeh, v'hag keren kayemet lo le'olam haba ve'elu hen. These are the things we do in our lifetime that make this world a better place and will be remembered about us after we have died, and we are in the world to come. Now, I want to break that down a little bit more because the English doesn't match the Hebrew completely. Elu devarim, these are the things she'en lehem shi'or, that can't be measured. She'adam, a human, ochel, eats perotehem, the fruit of them, ba'olam hazeh, in this world, v'hakeren kayenet lo, but the principle of it, le'olam haba, stays into the world to come. So I share that with you for two different reasons. One is there are two spaces of Jewish time. Olam hazeh is in the middle. That's this world, right here. And Olam haba, the world to come. And world to come, Olam haba, both means in the Messianic era, and it also means after someone has died. It's both personal and communal, but they get used a little bit different ways. But we have Olam hazeh, this world, and Olam haba, the world to come. In Judaism, it's much more of a bubble. And that's what I hope you're seeing here, that you have the Garden of Eden Adam and Eve, Garden of Eden, you've heard it before somewhere, right? Some theories that what did Eve eat from? A pomegranate. Apples weren't around in that area at the time, so probably not an apple. Pomegranate would fit. And you would also have clear evidence of eating a pomegranate. Why would you have clear evidence of eating a pomegranate? Staining, right? They catch, what do you say? You caught me red-handed. Oh, come on, folks. Right. Thank you. Okay, so you'd literally catch them red-handed. So, now she got it. Now Nancy got it. We're unmuted. Say it. So Garden of Eden, before they eat the fruit, is a state of shalom, of wholeness and harmony and peace. Everything is working in balance. Adam and Eve mess that up when they eat from the tree, which the whole presence of the tree that could break that is kind of interesting too. That's a whole nother class about the Garden of Eden and eating the fruit. I always talk about it like a circuit breaker, that there's actually is a circuit breaker that maybe they're not supposed to stay in that state of shalom. As I said, a whole nother class. They go out, there's a shattering, a breaking of that shalom in the Garden of Eden. They go out into the world, and you can see that Olam Hazeh, this world, is full of broken shards and holy sparks. You've got tohu vavohu, chaos and disruption, and you have God's light. And all of Judaism is trying to do is find those sparks of holiness, put the vessels back together, and get everything into order again. When that happens, we'll get to the shalom, get back to the shalom of Gan Eden, of the Garden of Eden. That is kind of the understanding of Judaism of the flow of time, that there's Olam Haba and there's Olam Hazeh, and we are trying to get Olam Hazeh into that Olam Haba. Does that make somewhat sense? No. Ask me or tell me where I lost you. I can give you another kind of image. So Isaac Luria, beautiful, brilliant mystic in Sfat in the 16th century. If you have been to Israel and you've gone to Sfat, you might have sat in his synagogue. He said that God is everything, and then God contracted. God did Tzimtzum to leave space for creation to happen. Into that space, God made vessels that came from the place where God was, into that creation. One vessel filled, it overflowed to the next. There's a flaw in one of the vessels, and boom, everything shatters and splits, and then you get creation. We call it the Big Bang Theory, right? That everything contracts, and boom. Isn't it interesting that Isaac Luria in the 16th century is describing the Big Bang Theory, not the TV show, physical experience? And so what does Isaac Luria say? When it explodes, the sparks of God's light that were going to those vessels are in creation. The broken shards of the vessels are in creation. And what are we trying to do? Put the vessels back together. We're trying to, and that's the word tikkun olam you might hear. Tikkun olam means to take the finding places of brokenness, where a person might be hurt, where there might be an illness, where there might be a natural disaster, where there might be people in conflict. When we bring peace, when we bring healing, when we bring grace, kindness, and compassion, we're repairing those vessels. And when we find those moments of joy and those moments of sweetness, then we are finding those sparks and putting them back together again to reassemble, so that we have that chain that goes from where we are connecting back with the divine. Yes?
As we follow the continuum of time, are we putting it back together?
There are moments where I say yes, and there's moments where I have to wonder. You're asking me where we are in that process? My guess is it's probably not a straight line, it's a crazy spiral. Because there are moments where we do find golden ages, like we saw in Spain at one point, and then people found ways of being cruel and nasty to each other and blew it up quite literally, right? World War II is a time of blowing up, but we also know there's moments of incredible peace and collaboration and kindness. This is the image of Olam Haba and Olam Hazeh. Now I'm going to show it to you with a pomegranate. And what I'm hoping is, I'll come back to that in a second. So, when you eat a pomegranate, you eat the fruit, right? Okay. Do you eat the seeds? Jane eats the seeds. Linda shakes her head and says no, but you've never had a pomegranate before. Is there any, do I have anyone who spits out the seeds? Okay, because right, a pomegranate, if you look, that's all the seeds. You see all of the seed, each little kernel has a seed in them. And so there's an impulse to spit them out, but there's an impulse just to crunch through them. Okay, that's where the fiber is. So you've got the fruit. What else do you have? You got the skin, and what else? Juice, right? You're consuming the juice and the pulp, right? So you've got the pulp and the shell, and then you have the seeds, and you're consuming the seeds, and then what do you do with the pulp and the shell? You might throw it away. However, what is the environmentally sustainable thing to do with the shell?
Compost it.
Compost. Thank you. You compost, okay? When you compost the shell, what happens to it? It breaks down, right? So if I'm eating a pomegranate, I could look at the pulp and the peel, and there's the past, right? And now I'm consuming the fruit. That's the center, and I saved some of the seeds. Those are my future plants, right? I've actually got some in the back that we planted.
It looks like it's like a raspberry pie. Is that what that looks like?
Yeah, we're talking about something that's, yay big. So the kernels are about the size of corn, like a corn kernel. Okay? So if we're talking about Jewish time, I could say that the pulp and the peel is the past, the seeds are the future, and the fruit that I'm consuming is the present. Do you all like that? Okay? That's one way of looking at it. I'm going to flip it completely over for you too. If I take the peel and the pulp and I compost them, what do they make? They make fertile soil, which is now the future of where I'm going to grow my next pomegranate tree. And if I took that seed and I looked inside, what is inside of the seed? Really, really far inside the seed. Like microscopic level, DNA. Where did the DNA come from?
Past.
Where does your DNA come from? Generations. That's your past. So in one way, you can look at a pomegranate or any fruit that has a shell and seeds that you would consume like that, and it's the pulp is the past, the fruit is the present, and the seeds become your future. You could also flip it over completely, because the pulp, which compost then becomes the future where you're going to grow. The fruit still is your present, and the seeds are an incredible reminder. That is our link to our past, because that is the source of all of the memories to know where you're going. Both ways of it are ways of thinking about that sense of past and present and future. There's a lot of Olam Haba and Olam Hazeh. Is the world to come our past, or is Olam Hazeh our future? And flip-flop. Sheldon, you were shaking your head no.
Because you're actually moving your hand in a circle, and there is no past and there is no present. It's all one circle. It's all one continuum.
Yes?
That's what I'm saying. So the seeds, the fact that the seeds are both the past and the future,
Yes?
is the circle of life from the Lion King or whatever.
Yes. That is exactly what this is all about. right? That the seeds are both the present or the past and the future, that the shells are both the past and the future. It's all of them being in balance with each other that you can see where that shalom is. And that sense of shalom being really, that I'm describing is a very sustainable system, that the plants are growing, that you have the fruit, and the fruit both has both the next generation of soil and the next generation of seeds. And it's also tied back to all of the energy that was going into that plant in order enabling it to grow. Yes?
What do they grow on? Is it a tree?
It's a tree. Yes, a pomegranate is a tree. We actually have a few of them on campus, and they do grow here. Yes?
When we studied the Seder,
Uh-huh.
you said that the elements of the Seder can vary based on geography, what grows in that area. Okay?
Usually the foods, but yes.
Always, or is it always the pomegranate, or is there another fruity thing in another area that they don't grow pomegranates? In other words, is the pomegranate consistent through
Okay, so
all areas?
in terms of Torah, because it's described the way it's described in the Torah, it's always a pomegranate. This would always be a pomegranate. What I'm describing to you in terms of Jewish time could be any fruit, any fruit. I just find it beautiful, as I'm talking about pomegranates, to talk about Jewish time in terms of a fruit in that way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So in Hawaii, their Torah scrolls don't have pineapples.
But you could tell the story with another.
The one I just told, the one about time? Yes, absolutely. Honestly, I started that story with a pumpkin. Because, and if I really want to be honest with you, it was around Halloween, and I really love roasting pumpkin seeds. And I needed a lesson to teach that gave me an excuse to buy a pumpkin and roast the seeds. And this was the lesson. And then I was working with kids from the religious school, and I didn't really want to deal with a pumpkin with them, so I got melon, because melon works for this too. Tonight, I wanted to teach you about Jewish time, and I'm already teaching about a pomegranate, so I'll just use the pomegranate. Pretty much any fruit that has a peel and seeds, you can use for this. It's a lovely image. That's really pulling back the curtain. Yes?
You talk about the Torah. Can you tell us what you know a little bit about the Dead Sea Scrolls that were found?
So that's a great question. The Dead Sea Scrolls were found in 1947, 48. They are found in caves in Qumran, which is just south of Jericho and just north of where Masada is, right along the coast of the Dead Sea. Okay? Those scrolls are from 2,000 years ago. They were physically written 2,000 years ago. I was in Fort Lauderdale seeing an exhibition of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I was struck by I could walk up to what was on display there and I could read it like Torah. And I'm like, wait a second, somebody physically wrote this 2,000 years ago and I can read it. Really quite eerie and incredible feeling and experience of having that. What the Dead Sea Scrolls are is those were they're books that included books and writings from the Bible that is now in the Hebrew Bible, and other texts that are not in the Hebrew Bible are found at Qumran.
There are also like business records.
There's all kinds of different stuff found at Qumran. Okay, like I'm pretty sure they have almost a full scroll of Isaiah. They have different pieces of Torah. They have all kinds of different stuff. It's not like a Torah scroll like this that you would find with Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy in it. It is different. Here's the thing. The earliest Torah scrolls that we have are from about 500 or 600 years later. We don't know if the Torah was different then, or if the Torah that the Jewish community, as opposed to the community that Qumran was using, was different, and we just don't have a Torah scroll from 2,000 years ago to be able to tell that. So it is an incredible record to be able to see it, but we don't have what other Jewish communities would have been using from that time to know what the differences might be.
But weren't they meticulous in the transcription
Of their text for their community, but we also know other communities had different texts they were working with. So it's a strange look. Even you start talking about translations, and you get the Septuagint, which is a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. You get all kinds of different and Targum, which is an Aramaic translation. You get all kinds of different pieces of these holy books. And so what we have from Torah, again, the oldest versions that they have of scrolls are from like 500, 600, 700, 800 in the Christian era. So from those points, we can see where the consistency is. We don't know what it looked like before that. Right? You also have the Aleppo Codex, which is another version of this sort of stuff. I don't remember how old the Aleppo Codex is, but it's one of those very old texts, and it also depends on how stuff like it might be that there's a full Torah sitting at Qumran. It could be that they haven't found that cave yet. It could be that they didn't use the full Torah like we use the Torah today. It could be that it was there and it got carried away by an animal. We don't know because we only have what they found. That doesn't mean it wasn't there, and it also doesn't mean it was there. Just to make it a little more interesting. Did that answer your question about what the Dead Sea Scrolls are? But they're beautiful. That's a beautiful, incredible artifact that becomes part of the story of, wait, how did we get this that we have now? What I'm always struck by is this that we have now, it is so old and so preserved, and there are so many ways that you can see, what I was showing you last week with Passover, that what I do in this day and age in 2022, happy 2222 everybody, I think I got all the twos in there, is so reflective of what was done 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago. That to me is kind of mind-blowing. Okay? So here is Olam Haba and Olam Hazeh, and I was like, oh, the pumpkin is, the outside is Olam Haba, and the inside is Olam Hazeh, and then I opened it up, and I'm like, wait, the Olam Haba is the seeds inside, and the Olam Hazeh is the outside. And it's outside or inside, and seeing how past and present and future, there's a lot of motion with those different pieces.
Rabbi,
go ahead. Go ahead, Ellen.
I had a question about that, because it seemed when you were describing about the fruit, and the seeds and all of that, that I wondered if there was some connection with sort of a mystical practice, because, for me personally, when I cut something open and it has the seeds, and I feel kind of guilty, like, do I throw the seeds? Do I plant the seeds? Do I compost the seeds? Because I feel like I'm holding a piece of something important that I did not grow. I mean, that, I had no hand in, I'm a recipient of. So I guess I was wondering, it just seemed like there was some sort of mystical, maybe connection.
I don't know. I don't think I would use the term mystical. I would use the term spiritual.
Okay.
And look at what is on your screen right this very minute. And the Lord said to Moses, I will do this thing you have asked. You have gained my favor, and I've singled you out by name. And Moses said, let me behold your presence. And he answered, I will make all my goodness pass before you. I will proclaim you the name of the Eternal One. The grace I grant and the compassion I show, but you cannot see my face, for man may not see my face and live. And the Lord said, see, there's a place in the place near me, station yourself on a rock. And as my presence passes by, I will let you into a cleft of the rock, shield you with my hand until I pass by. I will take my hand away, you will only see my back, but my face might not be seen. Okay? So what you're saying, Ellen, is when you cut into a fruit, you're having that moment of glimpse of all of God's goodness. You're seeing all of the love and care and energy and fertilizer and rain and water and that brought you that fruit, and all of the sustenance you're providing, and you're saying, wait, how do I keep that cycle of energy flowing? Right? And that is a huge part of it. And to me, that's those blessings we say. We say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri ha'etz. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, monarch of time and space, who gives us, brings forth or creator of the fruit of the tree. And so, yes, I think that to me is that cleft of the rock, and that little, here's a beautiful picture of it, kind of that image. You get a little bit of a hint of Olam Haba. When we're eating fruit, when we're in that place that you're talking about so beautifully, Ellen, when we get a chance of, I'm eating this fruit, how do I think about the past? How do I think of the future? How do I keep that flow of time moving and that flow of energy moving? How am I appreciative of where I stand and what's being given to me? That to me is that little glimpse of God's goodness as it passes by in that moment. And so that is, you're describing it so beautifully. I hope I'm capturing it myself, because that's an important part of Judaism. Remember what I said. How do you find the sparks of gold, God's holiness, in the midst of the shard? If we're going to eat the fruit, if you're going to eat food, you have to we're taking something that's been part of this cycle of life, and we're consuming it. How do we see ourselves in part of that cycle of taking that energy and returning it into the world? Okay? Did that answer your question, Ellen?
Yes, very well. Thank you.
And so, again, it's that capturing those sparks of holiness. And I will tell you that when we do acts like recycling and compost, those are ways of doing tikkun olam, of doing what we can to repair and take care of our world around us. Okay, we are now going to get out of Jewish time, and we're going to get back into some real heavy pomegranate symbolism. Are you ready? Okay, beautiful pomegranate. I need everybody, if you can, please count the number of seeds, please. Linda's already shaking her head. So I did find this, which was interesting. The average pomegranate can contain anywhere between 214 arils, or seeds. Although two great rabbis, the Malbim and the Chassam Sofer, seem to have had a tradition that every pomegranate contains 613 seeds. 613 is the number of commandments that Moses Maimonides, one of our great scholars, he went through the Torah, and he had 365 positive commandments, 248 negative commandments, and that equals 613. So you will see that number in Judaism a lot, talking about 613 commandments. That's the count done by Moses Maimonides. Of course, there's also 365 days in a solar year and 248 parts of a body, but that was also Maimonides. He was also the physician for Salhadin in Cairo. And so he was a physician. He knew a lot about the parts of the body. That was another one of their, that it's 365 days. It's all of the days of the year, all of time, and with all of our body. Okay? So two rabbis who will swear that if you really count every seed in a pomegranate, of course, it comes out to 613. Notice I don't have any pomegranates for you to test. Just saying. But you'll hear, that's a very common one. Yes?
Are there any other trees or fruits that are like a pomegranate?
Yes. I mean, yeah, that have lots of seeds in them.
Yeah, because like you got apples and pears are similar.
It looks like a cluster of strawberries.
So what it is, okay, so each of these are little kernels. Okay, again, I'm talking about a fruit that's about yay big, about the size of probably a small grapefruit. Okay, you can see that it's split open. Okay, and each of these is it's like a little kernel of corn, and they're kind of wrapped around the pulp. I think I had put another Where's that other picture that I put in? Ah, there was another picture I thought I had. But can you see it here? Again, so this is one split open. You can see the little kernels, and here's the pulp around it. And there's the crown.
So when you take a pomegranate like that,
Mm-hmm.
and you're eating the berries, not that yellow pulp that's holding the berries.
Correct.
So when I said that these berries look like raspberries, I mean, like, is that, when you scoop it out, is it like berries?
No, it's little individual kernels.
Like corn?
It's like corn.
Corn, but, okay, it looks like corn, but it's raspberry.
Yes, they're not berries. They're really like seeds. It really looks, you know how corn, when you pull it off of the, what do you, cob. Thank you. It's got that little place where it attaches in, and then you can kind of see the seed inside, and then you've got the flesh around it. Pomegranate is almost exactly the same. It attaches to the pulp, and you're pulling each one of them away. Yes.
If you have pomegranate juice, do they just mush the whole thing together?
Yes.
The seed, the pulp, and everything?
Yes.
I'm wondering if pomegranate's related to corn.
I don't think so, because corn is actually a monocot, and I don't think that a pomegranate is. Okay, so that's where the whole part of the symbolism comes from. So part of it is the crown, because if we're really trying to get ourselves aligned with God as our sovereign, look for the crown. Part of it is that there are a lot of seeds that could remind us of all of the mitzvot, of all of our responsibilities. Here's a little bit more of an explanation. Another explanation is the difference lies in the terms used. Talmud speaks of the lowest among us being full of mitzvot. Why does it say mitzvos? Because this is Ashkenazic pronunciation instead of Sephardic. So I am Ashkenazic. My family is from Eastern Europe. My parents and grandparents would have read Hebrew like this. Why don't I? And it's not because I grew up in Mississippi. Most American Jewry is Ashkenazic. And so they would use Ashkenazic forms of pronunciation. That's good Shabbos. So there's an S sound and O's, and it's just a little bit of a different pronunciation. Tomato and tomato, for example. Okay? In the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was a decision made in American Judaism that they were going to use Sephardic pronunciation because Sephardic pronunciation is what they were using in the state of Israel. So in order to show solidarity with the state of Israel, all of the kids in religious school would then start being taught in Sephardic pronunciation instead of Ashkenazic pronunciation. I can even give you a better timestamp. My dad grew up reading with Ashkenazic pronunciation. By the time he was in rabbinical school in the 60s, he said he used to pray in services and use Ashkenazic pronunciation, but in the classroom, they were forcing them to use Sephardic pronunciation. And it completely confused all the professors. Okay? It's the same words and all. It's just some letters are pronounced as a T and some as an S. Here's an example of that. Okay? You also might hear, some of you might say Shavuos, or I say Shavuot. The accent moves, and some of the letters have a bit of a different form. So here we have. So the Talmud speaks of the lowest among us being full of mitzvot, like the seeds of a pomegranate. But whereas on Rosh Hashanah, we pray to God that our merit, or zuchuyos in Hebrew, increases like the seeds of a pomegranate. That sounds contradictory. Why, if the lowest among us is already full of pomegranate seeds, or mitzvot, the number of pomegranate seeds, why are we asking for merit as many as a pomegranate seed? And here's an explanation. Mitzvot and zuchuyot are not the same. Mitzvot, or good deeds, are quite often performed mechanically and without forethought, such as they're not very always transformative. I might eat something, I say a bracha, that's it, a blessing, that's it. As such, they're not transformative. Mitzvot such as these are empty ones among the Jewish people. We have them in abundance. You have lots of examples where you just do ritual stuff as you're going. However, on Rosh Hashanah, we pray to God that our zuchuyot, our merit, increases like the seeds of a pomegranate. Zuchuyot are good deeds that are transformative and purify us. Zuchuyos, I can't even say Ashkenazic pronunciation, is related to zach, which means pure. That's purifying us. Did I miss a? I've got 2 paragraphs backwards. Okay, I'll come back to it. I don't know how that is possible, but whatever. Okay, so did you all understand that? So mitzvot are just, those are ritual things that you just do in the course of your day. Zuchuyot, these acts of merit, are something heavier, they are meatier, and what we are hoping, we hope that we have lots of chances to do little moments of ritual experience through the course of our day, that all of us, even the lowest of Israel, has plenty of mitzvot in us, like the seeds of a pomegranate. But what we're hoping to is in this new year at Rosh Hashanah, when we're partaking of a pomegranate, that the acts of merit that have real weight and impact on us and on the world that are transformative, those might be as plentiful as the seeds of a pomegranate. That's one way of looking at it. The other is this. The Talmud's description of the empty ones as being full of mitzvot, like a pomegranate, is descriptive of the lowest among Jewish people. On Rosh Hashanah, we seem to be praying to God that our merits increase as the seeds of the pomegranate, as if that were the ideal, the attribute of the best of them among us. Pri Chadash, which literally means the new fruit, explains that the empty ones took a lifetime to accumulate as many mitzvot as a pomegranate. Okay? So the mitzvot being like the seeds of a pomegranate, that's what you have your whole life to fill up. That's the whole shebang, that you can have as many mitzvot as seeds in a pomegranate. But on Rosh Hashanah, what we're saying is, maybe we can do that in just 1 year. May we have such a good year that we do enough good deeds that we are as fertile and as plentiful as the seeds of a pomegranate. And here, actually, that's probably, I don't know what my program was doing to me, but can you all see the little seeds and all of the different kinds of things that are inside? Okay? That's the pulp, the cob almost, and you can see these are all the little seeds that you break loose. When you open up a pomegranate, you have to do it carefully, because if you cut through one of the seeds, then you're releasing all the juice everywhere. That's when you get caught red-handed or red-shirted. And you dissect it. Now, there's all kinds of different ways of getting into a pomegranate. Some people, I'm one of those, I will dissect it carefully until I run out of patience, and then I strip what I'm able to pull out. There are other people that put it in water, and there's also the thump it with a wooden spoon method, that you hold it over a bowl, you split it in half, and you whack it with a spoon, and that knocks the seeds loose. I've seen all kinds of different things. It's kind of like the challah. Some people tear, some people slice. Some people whack it with a spoon, some people pull it apart, some people sink in water, because if it's in water, it won't spritz everywhere. Okay? You can even see up here in this corner, there's some juice oozing. Okay? Great and full of antioxidants. It's super fruit. And so there you can see that it's not just Torah, it's not just a shape they put on Torah, but the actual fruit itself is discussed with all kinds of really pretty incredible symbolism that goes with it, with the idea being it's a fruit full of seeds, that each one of those seeds is a potential tree, and they are acts of justice and righteousness, or are acts of connecting with the divine, as plentiful as the seeds of a pomegranate. Questions? They do grow here. You can actually,
They grow like the citrus trees that we have, like different.
Yes, they're very similar to that. You can actually sometimes find them at some of the different stores. I have actually grown some from seed as well.
To be,
Ellen and John, did you have a question?
Sean had a question.
I'm not sure even how to start, because do they grow flowers before they become fruit?
Yes.
And
And
do
the
they need to be
flowers
pollinated by the bees?
Yes, they do grow flowers, but what's really incredible about the flowers is they kind of look like miniature pomegranates. They are this beautiful orange-red color, and with that very distinctive crown on them. And so they're really striking and beautiful when you see the pomegranate flowers.
So do you need two pomegranate trees to pollinate?
I don't think so. I think you could pollinate from the same tree. But I'd have to double check. Any other questions about pomegranates or any other kind of questions? You've got me here. I'm here on the Bima, happy to answer questions. Yes, Sheldon.
Among the first slides, there was the list of all the things that the land of Israel would provide us.
Uh-huh.
And you mentioned wheat and barley. Is there any hierarchy between wheat and barley at any time?
Yes. There is a hierarchy between wheat and barley. Wheat is a lot finer than barley, and so wheat was more prized than barley.
Well, the reason why I ask, and that ties in with what I read elsewhere, was among the Romans, they considered wheat to be food for people and barley to be food for animals.
So, and barley is actually an interesting way. Barley is harvested first, and then wheat is harvested second. Yes, and actually you would make your regular bread during the week with more barley stuff, and then your bread for Shabbat would be the challah, which you'd make with wheat.
In this picture, there's a lot of white. What is the white?
That is wheat and barley and pomegranates and olives and dates and figs and stuff. That is a 7-species salad. On the handout, and to my friends on Zoom, I can send you the handout. I did give you a link to a website by Susan Barocas. Susan Barocas actually was here as a guest scholar about 3 or 4 years ago, and she taught us about Sephardic food. We had a lovely, lovely couple of days with her, but she has a lot of recipes with pomegranates because that was Spain was a huge center of pomegranate life. Pomegranate molasses and pomegranate tasty stuff. You had a question.
I had heard years ago that some of our fruit that has like 5 seeds in it, like an orange,
Mm-hmm.
and also something with the Star of David having 5 points, meaning good.
Well, the Star of David has 6.
Oh, it has 6.
And apples, I think you can slice like that and you can get a star. I don't even know if it's a 5-point or a 6-point. Have you done that with your kids? Is it 5? It's 5. There's a really fun story you can tell about an apple tree that's reaching up to the sky, and and then you slice open the apple and there's a star inside. And they're like, ooh, that's so cool.
Yeah, that's something I just heard years ago.
Yeah, so the simple answer is yes, if you slice them open, you're going to get kinds of patterns inside. And there's a article that I shared when we were teaching about latkes. And the gentleman's comment was, that's Judaism for you. We do something and then we figure out what it means. Yes?
I'm off the track now, okay? When you started, you said you might be interested in other things that we would like you to teach.
Yes.
Okay? In our church, we are just completing studying the book of Daniel,
Okay.
okay? And we grapple, it's Christian, okay?
Yeah.
We grapple with Daniel. We can read Daniel and the prophecy and things that happen real soon after, after it happened, with the destruction of the temples and all the different things that happened. And then a continuum of history that what goes around comes around, and perhaps we can reinterpret Daniel in today's life, or many different times, whether it be during the time of Hitler or whatever, there's always the story. Now, in Judaism, do you study prophecy and
Some parts of Judaism spend more time on that than others. But what's really kind of interesting, we're coming up to Purim in a few weeks. Purim is, we read the story of Esther. The story of Jonah gets read on Yom Kippur. Song of Songs gets read on Passover. Ecclesiastes gets read at Sukkot. And Shavuot, we read the book of Ruth. We don't ever read as a text for a holiday the book of Daniel, which is interesting. Just different places of emphasis that happen in our tradition. It doesn't mean that people haven't read and studied Daniel, but it's not one of the places of lots of intense emphasis in living out the tradition.
Well, that's sort of what our minister said. It's too mysterious for us. We got better fish to fry.
Right, and that goes back to the, I'm going to put you in the cleft of the rock. And you can't really look and see, you can't, you don't get to see Olam Haba. You don't get to see the world to come. You might get little tastes of glimpses of the goodness that comes from Olam Haba, but you're not going to know what the afterlife looks like. You're not going to know what the Messianic age looks like. That's God's stuff. You're in a different place. You might get glimpses and have moments of contact with it, but you're not going to be able to see it because that's part of your finiteness and mortality.
I want to give you another little story.
Okay.
I've been to Israel a couple of
Are you all able to hear this, or do you need me to repeat the question?
It helps when you repeat.
Okay.
All right. I was in Israel, and it just happened to go into the big temple in Jerusalem, and it happened to be on Purim. I didn't know anything about it. I knew the story of Esther, but I was scared because there were kids coming in and they were shooting off cap guns. And,
Okay, so you're using the wrong word. Okay, so the story is being told of going into the great, and you said the great temple in Jerusalem, and kids are shooting off.
The temple, the synagogue.
Ah, that's right. Okay, so in Jerusalem, there is a great synagogue. Okay, that's just the name of it. It's up on, I believe it's up on King George Street. It was around the corner. My apartment actually was about a half a block away from that. And shooting cap guns, and they're reading the book of Esther. What holiday was it? It was Purim. Okay? So Purim is a time where everything gets turned upside down. You're actually supposed to get so inebriated that you can't tell the difference between the hero and the villain. It's all sorts of merrymaking and jokes. And I actually also, if you were there in 1998, I was sitting in the balcony up there.
I think I saw it.
You might have seen me, but I was in costume. I was there at Purim time too in the Great Synagogue.
You have soldiers who are guarding it with military.
Right.
You know, so then you get inside and you got a bunch of people with guns. Say, are they the good guys or the bad guys?
You have to drink enough to be able to know that. I'm only somewhat kidding. So it's synagogues in Israel. Depending on when you were there, there's security. There's security everywhere. You have to go past an armed guard to go into the supermarket. And yes, so when you in most places in Israel, there are places where you would go in Israel where being clean or unclean, which is an ancient kind of whole purification thing, would be more important. If you're a visitor into those places in Israel, for the most part, they're not going to care, especially going in that kind of setting. I can tell you a different story about guns. We were at the Western Wall Plaza. This must have been the 2014 trip because Jill and the kids were with me. Jill is my wife. And in the United States, you don't walk around with a lot of people with automatic weapons on them. In Israel, all the soldiers are armed. That's just it.
And even people in civilian clothes.
Some of them in civilian clothes. I went into the bathroom and, go to do my business, and there's like half the Israeli army, it feels like. I'm walking around the bathroom, and there's a bunch of people with M16s. I walk out, and I said to Jill, I was in the bathroom with half the Israeli army. She looks at me, and she points us to the door, nods her head at the door, and because outcoming was the other half of the unit, the women were in the bathroom with Jill, she was in with the other half of the Israeli army. And it was just like one of those, it's like, that's Israel. which has nothing to do with pomegranates, except in Jerusalem, they have the shuk, which is the Machne Yehuda market, and that's where they have, oh, it's just, oh, the hummus, the halva, the barekas, the fruit, the vegetables, oh, it's just, the only reason I go to Israel is for the food. The halva.
It's good to practice.
So, any other questions that I can answer? So thank you all so much for being part of the window into Judaism.
Thank you. You.
And we will hopefully keep you up on some of our different projects and programs and experiences. There is coming up on March 16th. It's a Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, 7:30 Eastern. At 7:30 Eastern, if you're interested in Purim, we're calling it Musings on the Megillah. It's going to be the 6 rabbis. Each one of us is teaching for 10 minutes. And then there are going to be interspersed readings of the Megillah of Esther in Hebrew and English. And each one of us is teaching on a different section. It should be really amazing. And the reason we have to do it, specify Eastern time, is there are a few people that are in the Central Time Zone, that are part of the program. We have communities from the Chicago area, Knoxville, Tennessee, Plymouth, Massachusetts, Savannah, Georgia, Daytona, Vero, and Port St. Louis. So it's really pretty amazing for all of those small communities to band together on Zoom to be able to do that. So.
I have one other quick question.
Yeah.
In number 9 up there, it says, a land where you may eat food without stint. What exactly does that word stint mean to you?
That means that as you finish one harvest of a particular produce, the next one will already start. You're not going to have, you're going to have plenty that you're never going to have a lean time. Which in Israel, where if you don't get enough rain and you don't have the right temperatures and the right seasons, then you won't have enough food to eat, and that's when you have a famine in the land, and that's when you end up going down to Egypt, and all sorts of interesting trouble breaks loose.
And when God gave the people manna to eat, they were only supposed to take certain portions of that and not take any more. Isn't that correct?
So, but that's in the wilderness. This is in the land. So when you go into the land, this is the situation in the land. Manna is a whole different. They're in the wilderness. There is no Super Sol. There's no grocery store. There is no Uber Eats. You got to eat as they go off the land. And God is putting down manna. And manna is kind of interesting because if I go and I get more manna to save for the next day, it spoils. It was just what you need. And so manna is a whole different. Manna is actually in contrast to this. Manna is the opposite of this. This is the land is taking care of you, and that was God was taking care of them because they're in the wilderness.
Right now in Israel, because it was so much desert land, and now they're bringing water into it, that their gardens are really becoming very full.
In some place. So, yeah, so Israel for a long time had not had a lot of good, healthy agriculture. There were places where there was a lot of swamp, and there was places where there was a lot of arid land and desert. The irrigation, the clearing of swamps and the irrigation of other areas has done lots of incredible things for agriculture. It's caused all kinds of other problems, Dead Sea shrinking, for example. They've had problems with forest fires because they were doing too much monoculture of trees. They have caused environmental disaster up in the Hula Valley because they didn't realize that how many migratory birds were going. Just like we have in the United States, they have places where there is incredible success, and there are places where they've done ecological damage as they were trying to do something innovative and creative. There is that value in modern Israel of making the garden bloom, and sometimes that turns into some really amazing tomatoes. And other times you look and you see all of these cows sitting in the middle of the desert in in barns and stuff producing milk, and you're like, why do the barn cows need to be in the middle of the net? So sometimes it's done really well, and sometimes we're pushing the envelope too far. And then there's the pomelo. And then you're going to be like, Rabbi Bernholtz, what's a pomelo? A pomelo. A pomelo is like it's a cross between a tangerine and a grapefruit, and they're gigantic. You've had a pomelo before. They're really good. Problem is they're usually like $3 or $4 a pound, and they can be like 3 or 4 pounds. They're a big fruit. They have those in Israel too. I didn't eat a pomelo until I was in Israel. And then it's like, that's really awesome. You get to eat all sorts of things, like persimmons and dates and pomegranates. Clearly, when it's pomegranate season, I will have to invite all of you for a pomegranate party. To my Zoom crew, we're going to sign off because I'm getting out. These are pomegranate puckers. These are pomegranate candies. There is a tradition in Judaism when a person becomes bar bat mitzvah, becomes a Jewish adult, you throw candy at them. Okay? Typically, throwing hard candy can lead to all kinds of things like injuries and make messes. So we are civilized. We just give them out. We give them out at all kinds of different moments of sweetness, and they are organic. Cane sugar and fruit juice. They are gluten-free. They are tree nut-free. They are kosher. They are lactose-free. They're pretty much as healthy as you can get and be still. They actually, you can say that, but those are almost fighting words. I have had adults come up to me and say, "My throat's kind of dry. Can you give me one of those pomegranate butter things?" People will race for these. It's rather incredible. Oh, your grandson's in pomegranate puckers. So I'm going to put the pomegranate puckers down. Please feel free to come in and grab one and enjoy. And thank you for being part of our window into Judaism.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.